Hello again, everyone. My name is Germain. I'm host of what's called INFOcus, People and Places here on MCTV. Welcome to the studios, and we welcome to the studios for today's edition Jan Albers, Executive Director of the Henry Sheldon Museum of Vermont History in downtown Middlebury. Also from the Henry Sheldon Museum of Vermont History in downtown Middlebury. That's a long title. We have, and her title is Educational Coordinator, Director? Coordinator at the Henry Sheldon. We have Sue Peden.
Thank you.
Welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us, Jerry.
Jan, you have been Executive Director of the museum now for how long?
About a year and a half.
About a year and a half. Still relatively new.
Yeah.
You are a renowned author, and educator, and researcher here in Vermont. Talk a little bit about life before and then life after you joined the Henry Sheldon staff.
Well, I was writing a book called Hands on the Land for a while before, and when that came out in 2000, I spent a lot of time on the road giving talks all over the state, which was a lot of fun. But I decided to settle back down and do more applied history. I guess in a way the museum job is very similar in certain ways to the book, in that it's a way of popularizing the past, which is what I really enjoyed doing.
Mm-hmm. And I know that they're enjoying having you over there.
Well, it's fun. I'm having a good time.
What did you know about the Henry Sheldon before you got there?
Well, actually, I had been on the board before I became director for a while. So I have been, I've enjoyed the Sheldon ever since I moved to Middlebury 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. But I had been on the board for a while before I became director. So I knew about it.
Okay.
But I know about it in a whole different way now.
Oh, definitely. You're right there on the front lines now.
Yeah.
Sue,
I know where all the mummies are stored, shall we say.
That's always a good thing, so you don't bump into them.
Exactly. And they're stored at every nook and cranny. Yeah.
And we'll talk more about that in just a bit, and not just mummies, of course.
Yeah.
Sue, talk a little bit about your experiences with the Henry Sheldon Museum of Vermont History. How long have you been there, and how long have you been involved with education?
Well, I'll start with how long I've been involved with education, because I've been working in various capacities in education since I was 17 and volunteered in a Head Start program in Bristol when I was in high school.
And of course, we're always learning throughout our lives. So.
That's right. We continue to learn forever. So my interest in working with kids probably started when I was in third grade and decided I could do as good a job as that teacher was doing at that point. And so I've had a lot of different experiences working with kids, clubs and formally or informally. However, my association with the Henry Sheldon Museum started, this is my 6th year, so I've been there about 5.5 years as the education coordinator. And I am thrilled to go to schools and to bring students into the museum for tours, which always include hands-on activities, interactives, and try to bring history alive for students, Vermont history especially.
No, I know that you, and we'll talk more about it, your routines, your kits, and the way you get that education across about history to children, but it always helps that they want to learn these things. Are you finding that out in the schools? Are the children of Addison County interested in the history of their state and their area?
I think if you present it in a way that they can identify with the history. Yes, I was in Cornwall School yesterday in Jan Giles' classroom, and one of the things she does each year is to get the education kit from the Henry Sheldon Museum and set up an old school corner with 2 old-fashioned desks and items from the kit, and the students take turns spending the whole day in the old-fashioned school. So I think the teacher's ability to bring it to the students is key. But the students love stories, and history are stories, and I think they're really interested when they can feel like it's a story, and it's a story they can identify with.
Jan, this question is for you, and with your involvement with the museum. Do you see, all right, let me rephrase it. How important is the Henry Sheldon and a museum of its type in a community like Middlebury?
Well, I think that it's extremely important. I mean, I think the Sheldon Museum is really the cultural repository of this whole part of Vermont. And we are extremely lucky in that it is a far better and deeper collection than the average local history society. You know, all over America there are local museums.
Yeah, I was going to
But,
say it's your typical quaint small town museum. No, it's not.
But it's not. Well, that's the thing. It's not. You know, and on the surface, I think it seems that way. But it's a far richer collection than most. You know, some people have called this one of the best documented communities in America because, you know, and it's partly because of Henry Sheldon, who certainly got it off to a great start, and he had a good instinct about what what would be valued in the future, I think. But it is, it's a living, breathing, growing collection as well. It didn't stop with Henry Sheldon. I mean, I think that people over the decades and over have over a century now have come to trust that, we're the place to bring things that matter and that you want to see preserved. And so it's a dynamic, growing place as well. And we're always trying to find new ways to spin the wonderful information that we have. I think that's the challenge.
All right, I'm going to pick both of your brains. You've both been involved with the Henry Sheldon. And speaking of Henry Sheldon, my question is about him. But we've always heard about Henry Sheldon, the collector. He collected everything. The entrepreneur, he was involved in various inventions and business ventures and whatnot. My question for you is, can you just give us a little snippet, something that maybe we did not know about Henry, or something that we would find very interesting that we just haven't really paid attention to? Because we've always talked about Henry Sheldon. I've always talked with you folks about Henry Sheldon. So give us a little spin on him, something different for our viewers.
Well, let's see. Maybe a couple little tidbits that I like to remember about Henry. One is that we're not quite sure when he learned to read, but we believe he learned from his journals. He talks about having learned to read before he was 4, or by the time he was 3 or 4 years old. So that would mean that he was learning at home.
Okay.
He did not have a lot of formal education. And the other thing that people frequently ask at the museum is, was Henry Sheldon a wealthy man? Because he collected all these things. He purchased this large house to live in. And the answer was no, he was never a wealthy man. He always worked. He did a lot of wheeling and dealing, as we call it. But he did not come from a moneyed family. He came from a farm family in Salisbury.
Okay.
But he had all of his money at his disposal because he wasn't ever married. So that probably,
There you go.
that helped.
I don't know what that says about things. I don't dare say what that might say about things.
But that helped him indulge his hobby of collecting, I think.
Did he date?
But,
Did he have a social
Oh,
life?
he was a very popular person to have as the extra man to escort young women around town. He was obviously considered extremely trustworthy.
Okay.
And because he was very active in church and he played the organ and everything, and so he was kind of like everybody's favorite escort because he was very mannerly and very well liked by people in the community and considered pretty safe, I think.
So he was an eligible bachelor that no lady took advantage of.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think in one of his journals he mentions that he makes a conscious choice to decide not to be married.
Ah.
Right.
It was a choice he made.
So,
He
yeah.
did
Probably
write
wouldn't have any
letters,
room in the house for a wife or children.
That's right. Well, he didn't like children very much, I don't think.
Ah.
Unfortunately, we're
Yes.
trying. We've turned that around at the museum. We love children, but when he started his little museum, he said explicitly that children were not invited. So he was afraid probably that they would break things.
Well, that would
and,
turn away eligible ladies
Well,
anyhow.
that's true. Yeah, exactly. Back then, if you were going to get married, you were probably going to have children no matter what.
An army of children, perhaps.
Exactly. So he doesn't seem to have ever been interested in getting married, but there were no other rumors about him either.
But he certainly kept busy, that's for sure.
He did. Oh, he was a very, very smart, interesting person, I think, and he recorded absolutely virtually every minute of his life. I mean, he was very into recording his whole experience, and he really lived a very rich life in his own way, I think.
What what is his place in Vermont history, in Middlebury, Addison County history? How important is he?
Well, he's less important for himself and what he did personally than he is for his collection. I mean, that is something he did. But I think it's the fact that he started this collection that has been kept up so well is important. I mean, he made some very wise choices. You know, at one point he's traded some things from his collection with the college for the complete run of Middlebury newspapers. And now we're the only place that has the total run of newspapers from Middlebury. And so he was very canny in that kind of a way. But I think he's, you know, most famous as the starter of this wonderful collection.
And speaking of that collection, when did it become a unique situation? I mean, he passed away. Who picked up the standard at that point and continued this, and when did it really become you know, a very interesting thing to check out his collections?
Well, it was interesting during his lifetime. I mean, a lot of people came to see what he had during his lifetime.
Okay.
But he incorporated it so that the Sheldon is as far as we have ever been able to determine, the oldest incorporated museum of its kind in America. So that's kind of a claim to fame. So he really looked at it. He was very canny about looking out for its future. He didn't want the collection to be dispersed. He wanted it to stay together, and he wanted it to grow. And so he was, you know, I think that was kind of you know, there was very little precedent for that in this part of the world, certainly. So that was kind of a neat thing.
And the collection continues to grow. People bring things to you all the time. Talk a little bit about that.
It continues to grow. It's difficult, as you know, having been in the museum many times now. We don't have much storage space left in the building. We try to determine if there is Vermont provenance to the piece, or if it is something we've just been dying to have and we don't have one from a local source. It's always a toss-up. Do we start taking 20th century items now? Because, you know, the typewriter is obsolete, and even our work study students don't know what they are. Many never
In fact, they were
used.
trying to learn to use one yesterday.
Yeah, so some of the equipment we are using to this day, as probably Henry in his time did the same, is becoming obsolete even as we use it. So yeah, we're still collecting, especially you know, so many people come to me when I go to a local historical society meeting, or you know, DAR, or run into people in different places. Oh, you know, I have all these things from my great-grandmother or my great-grandfather, and I've been wondering what to do with them. I said, well, before you do anything with them, talk to the collections manager, Mary Epbright, at the Henry Sheldon Museum. And if it's not something we need, want, or are interested in, I'm sure she'd be willing to help you determine where's a good place for.
Can you single out a unique item that has come across your desks?
Well, I think this year, I mean, our biggest thing in the past year was that Sanford Witherell's estate gave us 2 extraordinary paintings by Sheldon Peck, who was an artist from Cornwall, early 19th century Cornwall, but he is really the premier American primitive painter of the moment. I mean, he is having a huge revival. His reputation just is going up, up, up. And these are paintings of the artist's brother and sister-in-law, and they're quite amazing. So, so that was a really exciting thing.
Yeah, those you did not turn away.
Right.
No. We certainly didn't. They're just beautiful.
Yeah.
They're stunning, and just psychological studies as well. They're very interesting.
Any strange items?
Well, there are always strange items, but I think more fascinating than the strange things, like, you know, Henry's teeth that we have and the infamous cat, are things that you would not expect maybe to find at the Henry Sheldon Museum. Currently, the exhibit that will be opening tonight is by the Bridge School, and it's their study of the American Revolutionary War, but we have interspersed some artifacts from Henry's collection with it. And I don't think that most people realize that we have documents and artifacts from the Revolutionary War here in Henry Sheldon's collection. So I think those things, as we come across them when we research and we're looking for things for exhibits, to me are very exciting, because they're a treasure chest that researchers and schools can use. If you want to see a bullet mold and a powder horn and musket balls, well, just come over, and they're in a locked case, and at the moment you can see them. So those things are fascinating to me.
Definitely.
Also, I think that the Research Center collection has always grown very consistently in terms of documents. So we don't have a lot of, for instance, we have a lot of 19th century furniture, not a lot of 20th century furniture, but we have a full run of all sorts of documents from this era. And people get, if a club goes out of business, or something, they'll give us all their minutes. Or if, we're a real repository for all kinds of civic things and business records and diaries. We have so many incredible diaries from all eras, that, World War I, World War II, right up to the fairly recent past. So,
and a lot of this is available to the public to check out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's often the case that people had history in school, and it was just this boring textbook with a bunch of dates. But if you actually sit them down with an old letter and say, look, read this account of the blizzard of 1888 that this guy wrote to, someone that's a friend of his, and it's absolutely fascinating. Everybody gets interested in that.
Sure.
Or if they read about, the beginnings of, some store in Middlebury that's still here, a store today, or some family that's still around, or their house. I mean, a lot of people come into the Sheldon who live in old houses in Addison County, because we have tons of information. If you live in an old house, we probably have something on it, and we may even have old photographs of it, all kinds of things. And I think people love things that connect them to their place.
Well, let's talk about connecting with the children of Addison County, and perhaps in some cases beyond. Sue Peden, you work with the children. Talk about the programs in a little bit more detail.
Well, there are three primary types of programs at the Henry Sheldon Museum. As you mentioned before, we have kits, and I think we're up to 20 different learning kits that teachers can reserve and rent out. And they have books for teachers, books for children, artifacts, reproduction articles, and they're all by theme. Things like, the local heroes of the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the settlement of Vermont. Homespun is a kit about making fabrics here. So the types of themes that are taught commonly through elementary school and middle school are represented by our kits. You can come to the museum for a tour, and some of the most popular themes, again, are olden days. We have a lot of kindergarten through second or third graders who come for the olden days. Early 19th century child's life in the museum, maps to the past, and some of these themes are also outreach programs at schools, having just gone into 2 schools with the Maps to the Past outreach program this week. So you can also, though, customize a program. If we know in advance that you would like to be doing a certain type of program, perhaps we're going to be able to do that for you, because we are a smaller institution and can say, well, okay, let's see what we can do with this school, and do we have the information they need, and can we make this work for them? So we try to do that. We are embarking on a collaboration, applying for a grant through the Vermont Humanities Council with the Vermont Reads program. And we are working with the Ilsley Library, Mary Johnson Child Care Center, Middlebury Union Middle School, and Mary Hogan Elementary School, and the Sheldon. So it's a nice collaboration that we're starting with, and hoping that that's going to continue in the future to bring us all together.
Wonderful. It's great when all these different elements can come together. Talk a little bit about what's coming up in '07. We're well
Well,
into the year, but let's talk about some of the things coming up. You have some interesting exhibits coming up.
Well, we have a great exhibit coming up that's going to run from June until almost Thanksgiving, till the middle of November.
Plenty of time for people to check it out.
Absolutely. And I think this is going to be a particularly fun and moving exhibit, both fun and moving.
All right. We'll get to that in just a moment. Bring us up to
Okay.
date. What are some of the examples of ones you've had in the past? You had one on John Deere.
We had one on John Deere that was wildly popular. I mean, people, didn't know, a lot of people didn't know that John Deere did his apprenticeship and came from Madison County, did his apprenticeship in Frog Hollow. And we got a lot of people who hadn't been to the museum before who were interested in, farming and agriculture and engineering. And so that was a very successful one. And then we had a big Vermont portrait exhibit last summer that also did very well, and that we have an extraordinary collection of early Vermont portraits at the museum. And
you had one on sports, too, a while back. Recreation?
Right, there was one on recreation before that, exactly, and that did well. So we, a lot of people are drawn into the exhibits. They're a lot of fun. Last fall we did a collaboration with the National Bank of Middlebury for their anniversary, and about the history of money in Middlebury, and that was also a topic that people hadn't usually thought about. You think about money all the time probably, but you don't think about it having a history, and so I think that was interesting to people.
Well, this
too.
next one, hopefully people think of a lot.
Some people think about it constantly. The next one, running from June to November, is going to be called "Wash Your Hands: A History of Health and Hygiene." And
Who comes up with these ideas? That's what I want to know.
Oh, she's looking at me. But anyway, though we all talk, the staff brainstorms together to come up with things, and sometimes board members and people have ideas as well. But this one, I really was thinking a lot about what is in the collection, and what is in the collection that is interesting, but people haven't seen for a long time, if ever. And one thing that really struck me is how much stuff we have, both in terms of personal grooming products, combs and brushes and hair jewelry, that strange 19th century jewelry, and it's fascinating how they've changed over the years. Exactly. And you see all those, portraits and pictures of 19th century gentlemen. They have all these weird beards. What's with those? All those different patterns of beards they were always cutting. And how did we get from guys who looked like that to the kind of clean-shaven early 20th century, look during the flapper era? The guys looked totally different. And also just health and hygiene. Health. When I was working on the portrait exhibit, one thing that struck me so much was how many of our portraits at the museum were of young people from Addison County in the early 19th century who died of consumption, or what we call tuberculosis. A lot of times, if a family knew they had a child in their late teens or early 20s with that disease, they would have their portrait painted just in case they didn't make it, and a lot of them didn't. And
that makes you look at those pictures a little bit differently.
Well, it does. It does. They're very poignant, very touching, and so I think that so much has happened. Health is an area where we've come so far in the last 150 years. And so we have a lot of, patent medicines and weird remedies, and the newspapers, the Middlebury newspapers were full of ads for these pills that cured everything. I mean, they'd have a list of things this long that, I was looking at a bottle we have in our collection today that was kind of a kind of snuff that was supposed to cure nasal catarrh, and I thought, isn't it the other way? Isn't it causing it?
Yeah.
And so there are so many interesting things about this. And so we've decided this is a great topic that everybody can relate to. And there are a lot of interactives for kids.
Yes, we will have different stations throughout the exhibit where kids can actually do something like grind herbs or get into an old-fashioned wash tub, kind of bathtub that you would have in the middle of the kitchen floor when you had bath night on Saturday night.
They can lie in a little
Lie in the
sick
little
bed or
trundle
play with
bed.
a doll
yes.
hospital.
We'll have a doll hospital. So, what are the things that what would the child's life be like during the 19th century when they were sick? And also things about hygiene. Now, what was it believed that would keep your children healthy? What were some of the tortures that people, the cod liver oil down the throat or whatever those things were, remedies that they gave their children.
Well, we are quickly running out of time. Quickly, a little sneak peek into the future.
Well, in the moment, we're very involved. We're just starting in a big strategic planning process at the museum because we want to figure out what direction are we going to go in the next 20, 30 years. I mean, how can we keep the museum's collection relevant? I think that science museums, natural history museums have done a better job in general than history museums of being interactive and relevant and fun, just a fun destination. They've been more of a passive experience of standing back and looking at things, but look but don't touch. And I think we want to turn that model on its head and do something fresh and interesting and exciting to make us a more popular destination. We do well now, but we think we can do better. So that's, I think there's a lot of exciting stuff coming up at the museum.
And Sue, as far as education goes, as we get set to closing this out?
Well, we're going to continue doing the wonderful things that work well for teachers. We'd absolutely love to hear any feedback of what people need. And more collaboration so that we can spread our talents around and create a larger program for the county.
I think everyone pretty much knows where you are, but one thing you have going for you is you're very centrally located.
Absolutely.
Can't miss you.
That's right. And when that new bridge goes through, we'll be right at the head of the new bridge.
There you go.
Where the two converge.
You'll have to avoid the museum or you'll hit it.
That's right. Don't hit it. Exactly.
Make sure you got to put in a little provision there that
well,
they make it go around you or something.
If they have that roundabout, we want Henry on a plinth right in the middle. Henry statue.
Henry Sheldon, Museum of Vermont History, and your normal hours? Are there normal hours?
10 to 5, Tuesday through Saturday, and in the summers we'll be open Sunday afternoon as well.
All right, learn about hygiene. If
Absolutely.
you don't have it already, hopefully you will by the time you leave the Henry Sheldon
That's right.
this summer.
Exactly.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Executive Director of the museum, Jan Albers. Always a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Jan.
And same with you, Sue Peden, who is the Coordinator of Education Programs at the Henry Sheldon.
Thanks for having us.
And I'm Germain, and that's going to do it for INFOcus for this time around. People and places will continue to bring you some wonderful people and travel to some great places throughout 2007. Again, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, take care.